be delivering the presentation today. And then we're going to follow it up with a Q&A panel with representatives from 3 local electric bike shops who can answer any specific questions that you all have. So we're joined today by Hakan and John, who are the owners of Electric Avenue. They both worked in separate industries before realizing they were really passionate about helping people connect with making electric transportation choices. They've operated in Eugene for about a year and are looking forward to many more. We also have with us today Mike Murphy, who is the owner of Pedigo Electric Bikes Eugene. He self-describes as an e-bike evangelist, retired banker, and a first-time entrepreneur. He's passionate about helping non-traditional bikers find the joy, freedom, and accessibility that e-bikes offer. And then last but not least, we have John from Eugene Electric Bicycles. He's the workshop and retail manager there, and he's one of the founding members of Eugene Electric Bicycles. And his favorite thing about e-bikes is how little power they use to get us around. He remarks that humans have gone from using a horse to get around to using a machine equivalent to hundreds of horses. And now we've got a 50-pound bicycle that uses half a horsepower and can do 80% of your travel. So John thinks that's pretty cool, and I do too. Before we jump into the agenda for today, I want to remind everyone that attendees qualify for a discount at each of these 3 participating shops. You can get $50 off an e-bike less than $2,000 and $150 off an e-bike more than $2,000. And we're going to provide a list of emails to each of these 3 bike shops so they can verify who has and hasn't attended. And I'm also going to ask you all to please hold your questions until the end for our Q&A panelists that we've invited. And at that point, we'll invite you all to share your questions in the chat box, and Karen will read them out loud for the panelists, and they'll jump in with answers. So now that we've covered all of that, let's walk through the agenda for today quickly. To start, we're going to be discussing some of the e-bike basics, why they're a really great transportation option, and what some of the terminology means that you'll encounter when you're shopping for an e-bike. And then Karen's going to discuss some of the shopping considerations that might make a particular type of e-bike best for your unique transportation needs. We're going to go over some legal considerations of e-bikes. We want to make sure that everyone on this webinar knows where they can and can't legally operate an electric bike. And then we're also going to discuss safety considerations. There's a lot of overlap between, conventional safe biking and safely operating an e-bike, but there are some unique considerations that you may not have thought of if you've never ridden an e-bike before. So we'll discuss all of that, and then we'll jump into the Q&A session I mentioned. But let's start with the what and why of e-bikes. So I want to start out by making it clear that e-bikes are growing in popularity, and I think they're here to stay. So e-bikes have been tried and true overseas for a while now. They're exceedingly popular in Europe and Asia. To give you an idea of just how popular, in the European Union, electric bike sales currently account for approximately 17% of all new bike sales, with some countries well exceeding that rate. In the Netherlands, for example, approximately half of all new bike sales are e-bikes, which is pretty significant. Some industry research groups project that the EU as a whole will reach 17 million new e-bikes per year by 2030. So it's only going to grow. And we're seeing this really pick up in the US as well. While the rate of e-bikes compared to total new bike sales is lower in the US, it's certainly picking up. By some estimates, e-bike sales grew 145% in the US from 2019 to 2020. And according to some estimates, US bike retailers sold 600,000 e-bikes last year. Now, certainly the pandemic has factored into that to some extent, but this is after multiple years of steady increasing sales numbers. So yes, the pandemic has factored in, but I also want to be clear that I think there's a real growing cultural awareness here of how versatile e-bikes can really be. And I think that's part of what we're seeing in the growing rate of adoption. So whether you're someone who's biking to commute to work, whether you're someone who's biking to run errands like going to your grocery store or taking your child to school, or whether you're someone who's biking for recreation, e-bikes can work for you. Pretty much whatever your use and intended need is, you can find an e-bike that fits what you're looking for. Just to quickly walk you through some examples, you can find great around town urban commuting bikes that are electric, cruiser style e-bikes. You can find electric road bikes, lots of great electric cargo bikes. And if conventional electric cargo bikes aren't your style, you can find Dutch electric cargo bikes with that bin in the front, as you can see. Foldable electric bikes are available, fat tire e-bikes, electric mountain bikes, electric gravel bikes, hybrid style electric bikes. And then there's a whole host of great electric adaptive bikes. This is a good example of an electric trike. And this one has the fun addition of the cargo bin in the back and the supportive backing on the seat. You can find recumbent bikes that are electric, which are great for people with some mobility challenges or people who are just looking for a different kind of ride. And if a fully recumbent bike isn't what you're looking for, you can find semi-recumbent electric bikes on the market as well. And if you peruse the entire universe of electric bikes and don't find something that works for you, I want to point out that there are other electric micromobility options that you may want to consider. These are just 3 examples. We have an electric skateboard there on the right, an e-scooter in the middle, and that device there on the left is called a one wheel. So while this presentation is really going to zero in on e-bikes, I do want to acknowledge that there are other micromobility options that may be of interest to you. But beyond the versatility of e-bikes, I want to make it clear that there's a lot of great reasons why someone might choose an e-bike. I think one of the first things that comes to mind for people is the benefit of conserving energy while you're pedaling. It's something that certainly allows a lot of people to go further than they normally would go on a bike. It's something that helps people get to their destination faster than they might otherwise be able to get to their destination. And those 2 things combined are just something that reduces the barriers to biking overall for lots of types of people. So there's definitely that benefit, but beyond that personal benefit, there's also really great environmental benefits associated with e-bikes. The City of Eugene's Climate Action Plan found that 53% of Eugene's total greenhouse gas emissions come from our transportation sector. And this certainly includes our personal vehicle trips. So if you replace some or maybe even all of your motor vehicle trips with an electric bike, you're really cutting down your carbon footprint in a significant way. And if we as a community can get more people on e-bikes, that's a great way for us to cut down on our collective community carbon footprint, which is certainly an important thing. This is all particularly true given how clean Eugene's electricity is. If you live here locally and you're an eWeb customer, you have the benefit of 90% of your electricity coming from carbon-free sources. A lot of that is hydroelectricity, but there's certainly some other carbon-free sources that eWeb uses as well. So riding an e-bike here in Eugene is just even that much more sustainable than it might be in a different region, for example. So that's a really great benefit of e-bikes. There's also a real financial benefit to riding an e-bike, particularly when you compare it against the cost of fueling your car. The cost of charging is obviously significantly less. If you live locally and you're an eWeb customer, you're only paying 19.14 cents per kilowatt hour in energy and delivery charges at home. So depending on your model of e-bike and how high you turn up the electric assist, you might be using 10 to 20 watt hours per mile, which would translate to less than a cent in charging cost per mile if you're charging at home exclusively. And a lot of people charge at their place of work. They charge, if they're in a library, in a coffee shop. You can take your battery with you and charge indoors as you're out and about. So that's something that even further cuts down on the cost of charging to you personally. So there's definitely that financial incentive that is really impactful for some people. Additionally, e-bikes are great for multimodal trips. So if you're a fan of LTD like me, you can take your e-bike on the bus with you. Now, there are some caveats to this. If you're going to put a bicycle on the front of a bus, it should be under 40 pounds. And if you have a model that is odd dimensions, like an extra long cargo bike or something of that nature, that might not be a great fit for a bike rack. But a lot of units are going to be able to be mounted on top of or on the front of LTD buses. And then if by some chance your bike exceeds that 40-pound threshold, you can take it inside the bus with you if it's under 55 pounds. So that's something to keep in mind if you want some assistance in connecting to transit and then riding transit and then using the electric bike to get to your final destination. And then finally, I want to point out the health benefits of e-bikes. They're a really great low impact cardio workout. I think we probably all know this, but cycling is great for your heart health. It's great for lowering stress levels. It can help people lose weight and, even more. And one of the really great unique things about e-bikes is that you can adjust the level of pedal assistance. So you can determine the level of challenge that's right for your personal health and that's right for your ability level, which is a really great thing for a lot of people. So we're going to jump in with a poll question here, I believe, before moving on in the presentation. So we just want to get a sense of how familiar you all are with e-bikes, with the options being not familiar at all, somewhat familiar, and very familiar. So we're going to give that a few seconds for some answers to filter in. Okay, I'll give it just a couple more seconds. All right, well, it looks like 52% of you are not at all familiar with e-bikes. So hopefully we'll be able to provide you with some great information. 45% of you are somewhat familiar, and then 3% of you are very familiar. So it sounds like this is going to be a good mix of people who are just learning all the e-bike basics for the first time, and some people who are just going to be building on some initial knowledge that they have. So that's great. So let's start by talking about the two types of motors. The first kind of motor I'd like to discuss is hub motors, which are centered on one of the bike's wheels. This is oftentimes the back, but you can find them on the front as well. And the great benefit of hub motors is that they are an affordable option. You're going to find them on a lot of entry-level e-bikes. You're going to find them on some mid-level e-bikes. And they're going to be great for people who are looking at the lower end of the cost spectrum. So that being said, there are a couple of downsides associated with hub motors. They are a bit heavier than the alternative we're going to be discussing. And oftentimes they only allow for a single gear ratio, which is not going to be a problem for someone who's traveling on relatively flat routes for most of their around town activities. But if you're planning on riding in topographically challenging areas, that's something that may make upgrading to a mid-drive motor worthwhile. Now, a mid-drive motor is centered more towards the center of the bike frame, as you can see there on the right. Some people say this creates a more balanced ride. But the real benefit of mid-drive motors is that they offer more torque. So they're going to be extra effective on hills. And that's something that a lot of people find important to them. The downside of mid-drive motors beyond the extra costs that I mentioned there is that some people say they're a bit more maintenance intensive. They can be hard on chains. So if you're going to get an e-bike with a mid-drive motor, make sure you have a good high quality chain that's durable. If the bike doesn't come with a good chain, maybe upgrading or even considering an e-bike model that comes with a belt drive is an option. They make e-bikes with mid-drive motors and belt drives, which mitigates the concern of chains breaking. So it's something to keep in mind if that's of concern to you. But overall, both of these options have their benefit. You can, with any of these options we're going to be discussing, I'd recommend going out and test riding both and seeing if, that upgrade or is of importance to you. So now that we've talked about the two types of motors, let's talk about how you activate the motor. So you're going to see two types of motor activation. You're going to see pedal assist motor activation on pretty much any kind of e-bike you hop on. So what pedal assist is when you mount your bicycle and you kick off and you start pedaling, your bike is going to sense that you've started pedaling and automatically provide you with motor assistance. Now, the other type of activation that you see on some e-bikes is the throttle. So when you see an e-bike with a throttle, generally it also has a pedal assist integrated into the bike. The throttle, sometimes it takes the form of a twistable handle, like you might imagine on a dirt bike. Sometimes it takes the form of a thumb lever that you activate by pressing. But either way, the throttle is just going to provide you with some extra juice, some extra zip. It's going to allow you to accelerate out of a stop faster. It's going to, whether you're stopped or you're actively pedaling, it's just going to provide you that extra acceleration capacity. And it's going to allow you to accelerate oftentimes without pedaling if that's something that you want to do. So both of these options are going to cut down on your effort of pedaling, and it's going to save your energy for biking further distances. It's a personal preference thing. Once again, I'm going to say, if you have the opportunity to test ride with and without a throttle, I'd recommend doing it just to see if it's something that is important to you and if you like the feel of it better. So now that we've discussed that, I'm going to cover the two types of sensors that you're going to find. So you're going to see cadence sensors, which I've also heard referred to as rotation sensors occasionally. And these types of sensors are going to adjust the level of motor output based on how fast you're pedaling the bicycle. So essentially, there's a magnetic attachment on your crank, and every time it does a rotation, it's pinging a sensor on the fixed portion of your bicycle. So the bike is detecting how the rate of your pedaling, how fast you're pedaling, and the faster you pedal, the more motor output you're going to get, the more assistance you're going to get. The slower that you pedal, the less motor output you're going to get, and the less assistance you're going to get. The other type of sensor you're going to see is a torque sensor. Now, torque sensors can actually detect how hard you're pressing on the pedals, which for some people, they think that I've heard people say that torque sensors have a more natural feel. I think this is because a lot of cyclists, they have that trained muscle memory of if I pedal harder, my bike will go faster. So for some people, that torque sensor creates a more natural feel for them. But both are good options. The cadence sensors that detect how fast you're pedaling, those are going to be the more affordable option. You're going to see them on a lot of entry-level e-bikes, mid-level e-bikes. And then once you get more to the mid to high-level range, you're going to see e-bikes with either just torque sensors or a combination of cadence sensors and torque sensors. So that's something to keep in mind. Test ride both. See which one feels better to you and see if the difference is something that's really important to you. So now that we've covered some of the general terminology, I want to talk about the three classes of e-bikes because what you're going to find on the market generally fits within these three classes. Class 1 e-bikes are e-bikes that have just the pedal assist, no throttle, and their motor has a maximum output of 20 miles per hour. So once it hits 20, it's going to cut out and stop giving you assistance. Class 2 e-bikes are e-bikes that do have a throttle, and they also have the maximum motor output of 20 miles per hour. Now, Class 3 e-bikes are pedal assist e-bikes. Their motor output goes all the way up to 28 miles per hour. But I do want to point out that Class 3 e-bikes technically exceed the state of Oregon's definition for what an e-bike is. which Karen is going to talk about a bit more in the legal section of this presentation. But I just want to flag that for you all quickly. So let's talk a bit about range and capacity now, because one of the things I hear most from people who are considering any type of electric transportation device is the concern of what if I run out of battery before I get to a charging opportunity. So I figured it's good to flesh out this section really well. So I want to start by saying that e-bikes, their range can vary greatly depending on a lot of variables. So there are some obvious variables like the model of e-bike you get, the specs of the battery that you get. Those are two clear things that impact the range that you're going to get. But then there's also a whole host of environmental factors that impact range. Some great examples being the hills that are on your route, the weight of any cargo you're carrying, the weight of the rider themselves can also impact range. Things like temperature can impact the range you get out of your bike. So there's a whole host of things. And with that in mind, take advertised ranges with a grain of salt. It's kind of funny. You'll see different manufacturers with very similarly spec'd bikes, bikes with, the same battery specs, the same motor specs. And yet these two different manufacturers are advertising different ranges for these bikes with very, as I said, very similar specs. So it's one of those things where it's hard to compare, and you see that difference between manufacturers because one is taking a more optimistic view of the environmental conditions your e-bike is going to be operating in than the other, and that makes it a little challenging. So something that's a bit more of an apples to apples way of actually comparing the range that you should expect out of an e-bike is looking at the watt hours. The watt hours are a unit of how much power your battery is going to be able to deliver in an hour. So if you are comparing, like whether you're online or in the store, if you can get the watt hours off of a bike that you're considering, comparing that to other units you're considering is going to be a better way of comparing capacity. Now, some manufacturers, you'll see if you're doing research online, they'll only provide you with the volts and the amp hours, and you'll ask yourself, well, what are the watt hours? You can calculate this yourself pretty easily. Just multiply the volts and the amp hours together to get those watt hours. And then you can look from one manufacturer to another and get that apples to apples comparison and judge the capacity a little bit better than an advertised range might. So there are some other considerations that go into batteries. So generally e-bikes, they're going to have lithium-based batteries these days. And those can be charged by any standard electrical outlet you have in your house or in your place of work. I do want to point out that while you, as I said, are generally going to see lithium-based batteries, occasionally you'll find some older battery technology on e-bikes. Occasionally you'll see lead acid batteries, which are an older form of technology that's heavier and it can have significantly shorter lifespan than lithium-based batteries. I've also heard occasionally you can find nickel-based batteries, which are better than lead acid, but my understanding is that they're still less efficient than lithium batteries. So I would just recommend paying attention to what kind of battery comes with the bike and making sure that it's a good modern battery, just to make sure you're getting the most bang for your buck. Another thing that I want to point out for you all is that e-bike batteries can be detached from the unit in most instances pretty easily. You'll often see a key system where you lock it on, you lock it off, you pull it off and take it with you if you want to. And that makes indoor charging easy and convenient for a lot of people who don't have access to outdoor charging. So that's something that is definitely good to keep in mind. And then also I'll point out that some manufacturers use a proprietary battery style. Now this isn't necessarily going to be an issue if you have a lot of confidence in the manufacturer being around for a while and having good fair prices. But it can make replacing the battery a bit more of a challenge If, for example, the manufacturer goes out of business by some chance, then you're not going to be able to find a good replacement. And that just kind of poses an additional challenge in the replacement process, because you will you will need to replace the battery on your e-bike eventually. It's just a matter of how many years of life you get out of it. So that's something to keep in mind. If you get a bike that doesn't have a proprietary battery style, you can shop around more and find a few different really reputable brands to choose from. So keep that in mind. I'll also point out that some electric bikes come with regenerative braking capability. If you don't know what regenerative braking is, it's essentially a technology that uses the heat and the friction generated by braking to create some energy and store it in your battery. Now, this certainly isn't something that all e-bikes have. My understanding is that you need a particular type of motor to do it. I've heard that some hub direct drive motors can do this, but then again, not all hub direct drive motors are going to have this. So if it sounds like something that's of interest to you, I would just make sure that you verify that whatever unit you get has it. You might need to go searching for it a bit more. And then I'll also say that if you're concerned about range, another great option is carrying a spare battery. That's something that you can carry with you and swap them out if you need to. If you're on a longer trip and you're worried about running out of energy, just bring an extra battery with you to make sure that that doesn't happen. And finally, I'll leave you with some tips for prolonging the life of your battery. So high power chargers are something that are great in a pinch. But if you have the luxury of charging at home, maybe charging at night, for those day-to-day charging needs, using a lower power charger is something that can be better for the longer term health of your battery. So this might mean buying both buying both a fast and slow charger, or buying a charger with variable amperage, so one that has both a fast and slow setting associated with it. So that's something that you can do to help prolong the long-term health of your battery. Additionally, I'll say that you should charge your battery regularly. A lot of us know this from our experience with smartphones and laptops, but letting your battery die isn't something that's good for it long-term if you do that repeatedly. So if you know you've drained your battery a bit and you know it's on the lower side, maybe once you get around the 30% range, just get in the habit of plugging it in when you can, and get in the habit of charging it up regularly, so you don't find yourself in that position where you're hitting zero and completely draining the battery. And then similarly, on the other side of the coin, don't forget to unplug it. Once you do charge that battery up, hitting 100 and leaving it plugged in for an extended period of time is also something that's not good for the long-term health of the battery. Oftentimes what a battery will do in that set of circumstances is it'll hit 100, it'll drain itself down to 95, and then it'll loop back and top itself off. And it's just a cycle of short charges that are not healthy for the cells of the battery if you do it super regularly. So if you need to set a timer to remind yourself to unplug it, maybe that's an option, but just something to keep in mind for the long-term health of the battery. And then finally, many of us know this, but extreme temperatures aren't great for the charging or operation of electronics. So if there is an exceedingly cold day, which thankfully we don't see many of, or an exceedingly hot day, it just may not be the best time to operate your e-bike. I'm not saying don't do it, but just keep in mind that if it's 100 plus degrees, it's just perhaps not the best time to use and charge. But certainly just keep that in mind, and all of these tips are ways that you can help increase the life of your battery. And increase the number of years you get out of it before you need to go and replace it, because replacing batteries is a normal part of e-bike maintenance. And from here, I'm going to hand it over to Karen, who's going to walk us through some shopping considerations that go along with e-bikes.
Thanks, Logan. So first, I do want to also say for anybody who might have joined us a little bit later, we will be holding questions for the end of the presentation, and we will be inviting you to type those questions into the chat where we will then share them with our very wonderful and knowledgeable local shop representatives. But going into the shopping considerations, now that Logan has given us all this like wealth of information about hub motors and torque and all that fun stuff, we have to ask the questions of like, when you are shopping for an e-bike, what are the questions that you ask yourself? Now you have all that information, what's the next step? And one of the most important things you're going to need to determine is, what are your needs for the bike? What do you intend to use it for? Important questions to ask include, do you need to climb hills? Will you be using the bike to run errands? What is your home storage situation? How fast and how far do you want to travel? How much physical effort do you want to put in? And will you be using the bike on paved, dirt, or gravel roads? Your body is also a major factor in determining what type of bike is going to be best for you. Your height, weight, and physical abilities are all important variables. To provide some examples of how your needs and your body will interplay with your shopping considerations, we're going to circle back to a bunch of those different types of bikes that Logan ran us through earlier. So if you plan to ride mostly in town for commuting purposes, you might want to consider a city or a road bike. These are going to be more lightweight with thinner tires. As an e-bike, you might want to prioritize a smaller battery with less capacity so that you can keep the overall weight of the bike down. You might want something that is able to deliver a higher torque to help you get started when you're at a dead stop at a traffic light, or if you need to ride in mixed traffic. The hub motor might also be something to think about. They work well on flat ground. But if you live in the South Hills, then you might want to consider a mid-drive motor that's going to work more in sync with your rear tire gears and can help you get up those hills more efficiently. If you plan to use your bike to transport small children, pets, or heavy/numerous goods, then a cargo bike might be more of what you want to think about. These would have more torque to help you manage the additional weight. And you do want to keep in mind, though, that the more assistance you use, the faster your battery will deplete, and that will affect your range. If you want a bike that can get you around town, but also handles itself on bike trails, then you might want to consider a gravel or a hybrid bike. They have wider tires that can provide more grip on unpaved surfaces, but they are not suited for rough off-road trails. For those types of trails, you're going to want either a mountain bike or perhaps a fat tire bike. When you're looking at these bikes, you want to look for ones that are able to deliver higher torques to help you climb hills and have larger battery capacities for longer range. The trade-off there is that larger battery capacity means more weight. That's probably not going to matter much while you're riding due to the assistance that the motor provides, but it's something that can be a factor when you are loading and unloading the bike onto a car bike rack. If you're someone who's taller or has some limited mobility, then you might want to consider a bike with a step-through frame, or perhaps a top bar that is angled lower instead of straight across. And just with non-motorized bikes, there's a multitude of different types of adaptive electric bikes out there for you to choose from, including the trike bikes and the e-recumbent bikes. And physical living space is going to be another factor that you want to think about. If you live in a studio or a one-bedroom apartment, then storage might be limited. In that case, you might want to think about a bike that is easily collapsible, or perhaps some of the smaller forms of electric mobility options like the scooter, the e-skateboard, and the one wheel, especially if your main need is just to commute around town. So while your needs and your body are very important factors when you are thinking about what type of bike to buy, there's going to be others as well, including your budget. E-bikes on the market can start as low as a few $100s, but some of the more expensive ones can easily cost between $5,000 and $10,000. There's a lot of reasons for this range, including the types of parts, like if it's a hub versus a mid-drive motor, the quality of those parts, where they're being manufactured and imported from, and something as simple as supply and demand. When you're thinking about upfront cost, it's important to remember that you get what you pay for. So while it may cost more, it's likely to last longer. But then again, just because it costs more doesn't actually mean it's always better. So it's important to do your research and talk with your local bike shop owners. You should also think about factoring in the cost of any types of upgrades you might want to make. If the components are proprietary, meaning that they're only available through the company that makes the bike, or if they can be sourced more generically. You're also going to want to think about the warranty. If you know your bike maintenance, maybe that's not going to be so important to you. But if you're like me, and the only thing I know how to do for my bike is pump air into my tires and put the chain back on when it falls off, then perhaps a longer warranty is something that you're going to want to think about. And then finally, with regard to budget, you're also going to want to consider the cost of maintenance. Again, the discussion of proprietary components versus generic comes into play here. Proprietary could potentially mean more expensive and unavailable if the company should, for any reason, close. Again, your local bike shop is going to be your best ally here, which is why your retailer is also a super important consideration when shopping for an e-bike. The quality of the components won't make much of a difference if your bike is not set up, tuned, and maintained correctly. We encourage you to buy local. You will have questions about your bike and possibly issues that require maintenance. So you are going to really be relying on the wonderful wealth of knowledge that your local bike shops are able to provide. This includes all of the bikes shops that are here with us tonight. And we also want to give a shout out to Bike Friday, the local Eugene company that hands builds bikes and e-bikes here in Eugene. So we do want to circle back to budget real quick. There are lots of great e-bike options for all budgets, including conversion kits. Instead of purchasing a whole new bike, conversion kits allow you to install a motor on your existing bike. A hub motor and a mid-drive motor conversion kits can be purchased both in stores or online. But once again, I'm going to beat that drum of talking to your local bike shop about your options regarding this. And with that, we're going to go into some of the legal considerations. So this is going to be stuff about like the definition of what an e-bike is, where they are able to ride, and how fast. So first, what is an e-bike? According to Oregon Vehicle Code, it is a bike that has no more than, it is a transportation device that has no more than 3 wheels, is fully operational pedals, a seat, and a motor that has no more than 1,000 watts and is incapable of traveling more than 20 miles per hour on level ground. So applying that definition, we can say that an e-bike is not a motor-assisted scooter. Those are required to go at a maximum of 15 miles per hour when operating on the streets, but they can be manufactured to reach speeds of up to 24 miles per hour. They are not a moped. Mopeds are both legally able to go up to 30 miles per hour in the streets and also able to be manufactured to achieve that speed. And they are not motorcycles. Motorcycles can potentially reach over 100 miles per hour, but they must observe the posted speed limit on the street. So with that, we are going to throw up one more poll. And this is, do you think an e-bike is a bike, a vehicle, or something else? right, I'm going to call it. Right, so most of you said it is a bike. It was a pretty even split between people saying it's a bike or people saying that it's a vehicle, and people saying that it is other. That is also 19% of you said that. Oh, and I'll just throw that up here real quick so you can all see what I'm saying. And so we'll just take that down. And yeah, so the answer to that question is that it's technically both. It's a trick question. The Oregon Vehicle Code says that an electric assisted bicycle shall be considered a bicycle, but it also says that bikes are vehicles. A bicycle is a vehicle for the purposes of the vehicle code. Every person riding a bicycle upon a public way is subject to the same provisions. So it's an if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C type thing. It's a tricky question. I'm sorry. So with that, we'll go into some of the more basic legalities, which include to ride an e-bike, you must be at least 16 years old. There is no helmet requirement, but we do recommend it. And we do also want to take this moment to note that children 16 years under the age of 16 are required to wear helmets on their pedal bikes, even though they're not allowed to be riding e-bikes. And you do not need to have a license, registration, or insurance to use an e-bike. But we do recommend that you register your bike as a precaution in case of theft. Because bikes are valuable, portable, and easy to resell, they are attractive targets. There are these two various bike registries, and there are more out there as well, but we're highlighting these two for now. They are free, convenient, and easy to use. There were 784 bicycles that were reported stolen in Eugene last year, but 121 of those were able to be recovered. So please register your bike. And for the speed limit, so if you remember, the vehicle code says that the motor on an e-bike shall be incapable of traveling more than 20 miles per hour on level ground with the motor alone. So that means that as long as there is human effort being put into it, technically you can go above the 20 mile per hour speed limit. But that's probably not likely to happen unless you are going downhill and have the assistance of gravity to help you go even faster. And it is this speed limit that allows e-bikes to be classified as bikes and operate in the same spaces, which include in the road using an entire lane, as long as you're traveling at the speed of normal traffic, which is something that is much easier to do if you're using an e-bike. If you are going to be traveling slower than traffic, then you should ride as far to the right as practicable. You can ride in bike lanes and paths. We do want to shout out here that in Oregon, there is a mandatory side path law, which states that if a bike lane or path is present, then you must use it. And as of last year here in Eugene, e-bikes are allowed to use the shared use paths, which includes the Riverbank Path System, the Fern Ridge Trail, and the Amazon Trail. They are currently prohibited in the East Alton Baker Park area, also known as the Willamette Natural Area. As long as you turn the motor off, you are able to ride your bike there. So it's just acting like a normal pedal bike, but you are not allowed to bike through that area if the motor is on. And a major difference between where e-bikes and bikes are allowed to operate is that it is never okay to ride your e-bike on the sidewalk. Whereas with a normal bike, you can, as long as it's outside of the downtown no sidewalk riding zone. We do want to note that this is a staged photo that was provided to us by our partners at Electric Avenue and not an actual sidewalk rider. And with that, we will go into safety considerations. So like we said, it is not required to wear a helmet, but we do highly recommend it. We want you to protect that noggin, keep yourself safe, be seen, use a front white light and a rear red light. This will help you be seen better at night and just keeps everything safe on the road. Be heard, use a bell. That's going to be especially effective for if you're encountering people who are walking. Maybe you want to take it the extra mile and perhaps use like an air horn for people who are driving, who might not be as easily able to hear you with your little like ding ding. Look behind you. Before moving into the lane of traffic, say because something's blocking it, like a truck is offloading cargo or there's construction going on, if you have to merge into traffic, look over your shoulder, make sure that there's no cars coming up behind you, especially as cars are getting quieter these days. And a mirror is going to be a great backup option here. Make sure that your tires are inflated. Not only is this going to help improve your range, but it will also give you better control over your bike should you need to react quickly in a situation. And maintain your bike. Annual tune-ups and routine maintenance are also critical to keeping your bike running smoothly. You don't want something to go wrong while you're in the middle of a busy intersection or cruising downhill. This is another opportunity for me to stress the importance on relying on the skills and knowledge of our local bike shops. Pay attention. People driving are not likely to expect someone on a bike to be reaching such high speeds, and that disconnect can lead to some potentially dangerous scenarios. So that means you should also be riding defensively and just assume that everybody is out to get you. This isn't likely the case, but again, that disconnect can create some dangerous scenarios. For instance, a person driving might think that they will be able to make a turn before you reach the intersection, and then it's just a bad news bear scenario that we don't want to happen. And regulate your speed. Take some time to learn how your bike feels at lower speeds before cranking it up to 11. And because of the ability to reach such greater speeds than you normally would on a pedal bike, it's important to brake earlier before approaching a traffic light or a traffic sign. And be careful while mounting and dismounting from your bike. If it tips over while you're getting on and off, again, they do tend to be heavier than normal bikes. And if it falls down on you, that can also be another painful situation that we do not want to happen. Ride smart, ride with the flow of traffic. This will help prevent a collision happening because somebody driving a car didn't see you because they didn't think that they should be looking in the opposite direction. And obey signs and signals. We would like to note that as of January 1st of last year, 2020, it is now legal for people on bikes in Oregon to treat stop signs as yield signs. You still have to treat a red light like a red light, but you can treat a stop sign like a yield sign. And make eye contact. This will help navigate tricky intersections. So if sometimes you don't always know who's going first or if people are aware of their situation. So if you make eye contact with somebody walking or somebody driving, it just helps better navigate that situation. And be courteous. So people who are walking always have the right of way. So wheels yield to heels. You should keep to the right, but pass on the left. And when you are passing, give a warning. So that could be a on your left, or the ding ding of your bell, or perhaps the booga of your air horn. And if you are going to be stopping, do not just stop in the middle of a lane of traffic or a bike lane or the shared use path. That can create a not great situation. So if you're going to stop, just move to the side. And finally, on the topic of courtesy, please use safe speeds. This is especially important on our shared use paths, like the riverbank path, where there are small children running around that don't have situational awareness. There are pets running around, people walking with earphones on that aren't going to hear your warning. So just please use safe speeds. And that also goes into the looking and listening, just being aware of your surroundings and reiterating the importance of using your lights at night. Not only is this going to help keep you safe, but it is going to keep the other people on the road with you, people walking, people driving, people using scooters or wheelchairs, everybody else. It's just going to create a better situation. So if you would like to learn more about riding safely, the Greater Eugene Area Riders, also known as GEARS for short, is going to be hosting an online class live on Tuesday, May 11th. So that's next week at 12 p.m. You'll be able to learn more about fitting your bike properly, the basic rules of the road, and more tips and tricks for how to enjoy your ride. So there's going to be more information about that on the City of Eugene Transportation Planning Facebook page. And we would also like to let you know that as soon as it is safe to hold larger in-person events again, we do plan to be hosting an e-bike expo. So that's going to be an in-person event that will feature a wide array of e-bikes from our local shops, including all 3 shops here, and local makers. And so that's going to be a one-stop shop for all those different types of bikes that we've been talking about today. And we hope to get word out about that once it is ready to happen. And so with that, we are going to open up the floor to our wonderful and knowledgeable local e-bike shop experts. But first, before that, we are going to ask them to introduce themselves more formally. So hopefully, I believe everybody in attendance should be able to see all of our wonderful panelists. So I guess I'll do a roll call, and let's start with Håkan and John.
Yep. Hey guys, my name is Hakan. This is my brother John. We grew up in Eugene, so this is what we call our stomping grounds. And we've ridden these streets and these paths our whole life. It's some of the best memories we have. So being downtown with a shop like this, it's a humbling experience. And we'd love to help in any way we can. So if we can, don't hesitate to ask.
Thanks. John?
Hi, I'm John. I run Eugene Electric Bikes and founded it about 6 years ago with my family. Don't have too much else to add. You guys will have plenty of questions of your own, so let us know.
And Mike.
Good evening. I'm Mike Murphy with Pedigo Electric Bikes here in Eugene. Opened our location in November with a goal of trying to help kind of non-traditional folks, helping them to provide access and freedom to get out in a bike and try to find some ways to help them get active and get in motion. And so we're excited to be here, and I really appreciate the city bringing this opportunity for everybody.
Thanks, Mike. So this is going to be our time for question and answer. So please start typing your questions into the chat, and I will then read those aloud to our panelists, and we can start getting those questions answered.
Oh, there's Q&A.
There is one question in the Q&A from earlier that is, what about LiFePO batteries? Also,
Lithium ferrous. Yeah. So It's kind of the difference just between iterations of batteries. Lithium iron phosphate batteries, it's just a different chemistry. Um, they're not too much older so that you would have to worry about your behavior in charging. Kind of just treat them like a lithium ion battery is the easiest way.
Any local shops sell/service conversion kits?
We do. Eugene Electric Bikes, we do conversion kits in-house. They're actually the one that was on the slide. It's a Bafang 750 watt motor. We toned down to 500 or 600. Adds about 25 pounds to the bike. If you need more information on it, you can find it on our website. We got a pretty good detailed section about conversions. Standard rate's about 1,500, parts labor included. So.
I don't know if anybody would like to talk more about theft mitigation tactics. One of our attendees says that if they get one, it would be parked in a public place, and they have had so many bikes stolen.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is a thing that is very prevalent here in this city. But obviously, if you invest in a bike, part of that investment is investing in securing that bike, securing your investment. So a great lock is a starting point. Some locks, well, most of them have ratings, but some even have built-in alarm systems. So it'll make noises if it's messed with. And there are trackers you can put on your bike as well, Bluetooth and GPS trackers, so you can track it in real time. There's also electric bike insurance you can pay for to cover theft and damage and that kind of stuff.
Can batteries be locked, quote unquote, and not able to be stolen if parked?
Almost all electric bikes have a battery that locks on there. And I have yet to see a single case of someone losing their battery without also losing their bike.
Yeah.
So.
Are there programs or tax incentives available through the state for e-bike ownership?
Through the federal government soon, hopefully. And I believe Mike's got some good details on that one.
Yeah, there's a number of things that are working through legislative bodies at the moment, trying to look for something up to 30% or $1,500 based on the value of the bike. There's a number of groups as part of the transportation bill that are in support of that process. And so we expect to get some updates around what those might look like, but we're very optimistic that as part of the ongoing push for micro mobility and e-bikes in general, that we'll see some added incentives coming down the pike. I just can't give you a date today when those will be in place.
Mike, have you heard anything about if you already purchased an e-bike and that incentive does go through, that you'd be able to still then claim that rebate? Have you heard anything about that?
There's been some discussions about making it retroactive, but I think until, you know, the devil are in the details, until you get through kind of the bigger language and down what comes through and out of the actual law, I think that it would be difficult to say for sure, but there is some conversation about it. Yeah.
And I would say one more time that all people who are attending the workshop today are eligible for a discount with our three wonderful shops here today. So that was $50 off of a bike that is less than $2,000, an e-bike that is less than $2,000, and $150 off of an e-bike that is more than $2,000. What is the current availability of women's e-bikes?
Interesting. I mean, we don't really sell gender-related bikes, at least at our shop. We really think about them as step through and classic, just because in our particular case, our client base tends to skew a little older, and so what we have is really the ability to get on and off a bike safely. But we also carry a number of sizes of bikes. So whether they're The smallest, would be tire size around 20 to 24 inches with the low step through. The lowest step through we have is a 9-inch step through for a bike. And so I think most manufacturers, and I would bet that John and Hawk and John would also say that there's really a focus on trying to find the right fit for the person riding the bike, regardless of gender, and assuming that they, will be able to actually enjoy riding that bike. And so I think there's a recognition, and has been recognition, that we need to provide choice. And then, of course, I think all of us would say that we want people to ride the bikes to make sure that they actually have an opportunity to make sure that it fits them properly, regardless of gender.
Yeah, sometimes you'd be surprised. You really would be surprised that a bike you thought would be the perfect bike, and then you go try some other bikes out, and a bike that's totally different is the perfect bike for you. So go try them all.
Can you please comment about brakes? I see people having trouble stopping.
Brakes and tires are the things that keep you connected to the earth, keep you going, and stopping you. If you don't take good care of your brakes, they're not going to take good care of you. So aside from, the whole argument of how much you should spend on a bike for what quality of brakes you're going to get on it, always take care of your brakes. Always make sure they're going to stop you before you go anywhere. And if they're not, then maintenance is needed.
Yep.
It's just like if your brakes didn't stop you in your car, you wouldn't go anywhere. So anyone that's not stopping on their bike shouldn't be going.
Yeah. And I think, there's been a lot of, I would say most of the electric bikes, well, certainly all the ones that we carry certainly come with disc brakes these days versus some of the old style brakes you might have seen in the past. I mean, when you have bikes that are capable of doing up to 20 miles an hour, or in some cases greater, I think there's been an investment in, I think, all of our shops to make sure that there is a adequate braking, at least one that's designed to help with that. And as John said, it's critically important. Maintenance in general, to make sure that you're able to ride safely, is certainly important.
What are the fire dangers associated with charging?
Lithium batteries are inherently safe as they're designed. But if you don't charge your battery at the correct voltage, you can start a chemical reaction that becomes a runaway reaction and becomes very hard to stop. So if you own multiple e-bikes, let's just say a low power one and a higher power one, and you plug the higher power charger into the lower power bike, you can start a battery fire in your house relatively quickly. So always use care when charging your electric bike. Good night. Do you want to say good night to everybody as well?
Night.
Love you. Coco? This is my other salesman, so.
If there's no more comments on that, then the next question is, are front shocks standard on any bikes that are not mountain bikes?
Quite a few, but standard's a testy word, so.
Yeah. They exist and they don't.
Yeah.
Can you speak more about e-bikes for kids, what to look for, how to get a child started? Again, children under the age of 16 are not legally allowed to be using e-bikes in the state of Oregon.
There is a company, I think, called Stacy, and they make a little strider bike which has no pedals. It's like a little kid kind of kick. They kick it like this, and actually I believe they do make an electric one. So maybe look into that if they're that young, that small.
Or a large piece of private property somewhere, but yeah, generally speaking, we don't cater to that market.
Any advice for how to keep informed about possible retroactive rebates for e-bikes already purchased?
E-bike forums.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, typically that information will come out of the state of Oregon, and there's also some tracking sites like People for Bikes would be another place you can look for. There's some lobbying areas. Those would be the two that come to mind, but maybe John or Hawk have some other ideas.
Well, I've learned a lot just by reading forums where people from all over the world post about their bikes and the news on bikes and that kind of stuff. So if you find a good one, not only can you find great advice, but you can also usually be kept up to date with most of the current e-bike trends and laws and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
pick a
this too. You can
pick a
ask.
few subreddits, internet feeds of your choice, wherever you get your information. But then I guarantee if there's retroactive discounts for bikes already purchased, all three of us are probably gonna, or all four of us are gonna have something in the window. So swing by, get your tires pumped up, see if anything new's happening in the e-bike world.
And in general, just, you know, if you don't know who your representative or congressman is, I mean, those folks are, I mean, I think it's Earl Blumenauer is one of the ones that's writing, you know, as part of the sponsorship for that bill. So certainly you can reach out to his office for updates. And I know that they're very active in that process.
Does the discount for workshop attendees apply for conversion kits / installs?
That's unfortunately going to be a no. We actually undercharge for the labor we do for a lot of our conversions. So unless you just have that prime bike where everything goes right, we're actually giving a bit of a discount on labor for conversions. We just did the math a few years ago and realized that people that were buying them and then bringing them to us, it was a bigger headache and more expensive for them. Bigger headache for us, more expensive for them. They ended up happy afterwards, but yeah, sorry about that. For new bikes, definitely.
Do all three of the shops present here today carry e-trikes that can be test ridden?
We do not carry e-trikes at our shop. The closest thing we would have is kind of a cruiser looking, motorcycles looking bike with a sidecar, which we'll be showing here in the next couple of months.
Unfortunately, Pedigo does actually, as part of their lineup, have an e-trike, but unfortunately are not available to order or so, and therefore not available to test ride at this time. We're hoping, fingers crossed, that we would see something in the second half of the year, but I'm not optimistic about that at this time. We are just taking reservations, and if I can land my hands on 1 or 2 or 10, I definitely would get them out to people right away.
Pretty similar answer. We don't stock trikes or recumbents, but we've had a lot of good luck over the years doing, again, conversions for people with quality trikes or recumbent trikes. But for people looking for a new trike, I actually send them up to Portland. There's a really nice local store up there called PDX Recumbent. They're on Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard, and they're brilliant. If you're really looking to get fitted to a trike, especially if you're you know, a previous road cyclist who has mobility issues that prevent you from getting on like a long ride, getting a quality recumbent from them and fitted by experts is really a good idea. As much as I love doing conversions, if you don't already have one, that's 100% the best bet.
Do e-bikes require different quality tires, and how long do they last?
They're heavier, they go faster. Physics says you're going to go through your tires more quickly if you're taking advantage of those. Like I said before, tires are the one thing that connects your bike and you to the earth. Don't skimp on them if you can help it.
Yeah, and a lot of e-bikes, a lot of styles that are coming out now do have the fat tire bikes, what they call fat tires, which are either like, you know, 3 or 4 inch wide tires. And so that's kind of sometimes a change for some of the people that are getting into the e-bike sport from what they're used to. I mean, we all grew up, at least for myself, I never had fat tire bikes until I started looking up this e-bike craze. So that could be a difference.
I'm only seeing one more question in the chat at this moment, and that is, in Washington, D.C., electric bikes and scooters, mostly rentals, have a reputation for bad behavior. Is there a culture of respect here with local riders?
Yeah, I mean, we sell scooters here at Electric Avenue, and you know, we have scooters that can go 10 to 15 miles an hour, and we have scooters that can go upwards of 30 to 40 miles an hour. So a lot of the times, the rider, you know, is going to be the overall factor, but a lot of the people that I've met and ridden with here, as far as doing group rides and local events, very respectable, and they don't want to impose that sort of bad stereotype that some other cities have written about, you know, people trashing them and making a mockery of them. So personally, I haven't seen that here with any of my customers.
I think it, Pedico is known for cruiser bikes, and and so the reality is we spend a fair amount of time walking through safety and walking through the concerns about sharing the road and those kinds of things. Having said that, people, are individuals that make their own decisions over time. Our hope is, I think, for all of us here on the call, that we see a city in the future that's filled with all kinds of modes of transportation, all working harmoniously together. And I don't know that we can impose that on anybody, but I know that all of us find that that's important to us, just from a holistic standpoint. We want people to have fun, but want them to be safe. I mean, that's going to be something that's going to be important to us, I think, both from a vision of multimodal transportation, but also just from the standpoint of just a livable city. And so, is the culture there today? I think it certainly is not what I've seen and heard about from other cities, and not familiar with Washington, D.C. in particular, but it definitely is something I think all of us think about and probably spend a lot of time talking to people about especially when they rent from us. But I don't know that we'll know the answer to that until we see more and more bikes on the road.
And there were actually a couple of more questions that found their way into the Q&A section. Forgive me if some of these have already been answered, but I have a somewhat unique recumbent. Who can help me use a conversion kit?
John Donald.
Yeah, send us some pictures of it, or swing it by the shop sometime. We'll give you a quote on whether or not we can do it. If it's a recumbent, most likely yes. But again, I really want to see it. We've had some strange cases before where we've actually had to do some frame modification, and one where we had to take the motor apart and install it on the bike and its various components. So let's see what you got.
Are there special considerations for carrying passengers, such as kids, rather than just cargo?
Quite a few. If you're carrying your kid on the back of your electric bike, my biggest thing is, of course, making sure your bike is well maintained and that you know how to ride it confidently. Don't ever get on an electric bike with a kid if you haven't ridden it before. Even more so than that, look at the limitations of the bike and what you're trying to do. I never suggest going over 15 miles an hour with a kid unless you have a cargo specific bike where they're protected by like monkey bars. If you've ever seen a cargo bike where the kids are in their little cage, something like that, or putting them in a trailer with a roll cage. The Burley, which is a local company, they have some really good trailers for that as well.
I believe we discussed this one already about the current availability of smaller framed women's e-bikes.
Yeah, and I think we all have, if she's asking about the actual physical stock, I think all of us have bikes that would work for her in stock.
One of our attendees says that they have a Bike Friday with a battery pack that doesn't lock. I assume I should bring the battery with me when I lock the bike.
Not a bad idea.
I would not leave it out by itself.
Yeah, because if you don't do that, then I'll have to stop saying that I've never seen a case of someone losing their battery.
So circling back to the Life P04 batteries, are they becoming more common, safer?
As far as safer, I really don't have too many concerns about safety of lithium-ion batteries. It got really blown out of proportion a few years ago, back when flat pack lithium polymer batteries were really a big thing. And the crummy thing about those is they had thermal runaway inside the battery management system, whereas lithium-ion batteries now, when stuff goes wrong, they actually self-discharge. And so to a certain degree, they actually just shut themselves down. And so getting catastrophic runaways like fires is really rare with lithium batteries, unless you're puncturing them. Like if your bike gets, if it gets dropped off of your car going 60 miles an hour on the highway, it's not a safe battery anymore. But within normal use, they're very safe. As far as the lithium iron phosphate batteries, they're still expensive to produce, and there's a lot lower availability. So none of the major manufacturers like Bosch or Bafang are picking them up for use. So you might see them in specialty brands in the next 2 to 3 years, but I wouldn't expect to see them through the major brands for at least 4 or 5. When you see really cool stuff about batteries, it's always 5 years away minimum.
Right.
And again, I said this last week, sorry, and ahead of time about anyone asking about batteries. I have nothing but long answers.
It's informative though. That's
Yeah.
that's good to know.
We've touched on this already. How can we keep informed about retroactive rebates for bikes already purchased? And circling back to the chat, electric bike rentals?
Yes.
just yes.
Yes. We do them. I think all of us do electric bike rentals.
Mhm.
And seeing no further questions, I think it might be time to call this an evening. Thank you so much, everybody, for everybody who attended the workshop and listened to us ramble on and on and on about e-bikes. Thank you to all of our wonderful panelists for sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. And yeah, just thank you everybody for helping to make this such a great event. I appreciate you all.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thanks for the invite.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy your e-bikes.
Right.
Have a good one.
Good night, everyone.
Night and goodbye. Good night and goodbye. Till next time, my little girl.